These are assembly instructions for my pop-up gazebo card. These two pieces are the base of my card. I've cut them out of craft board, and for this piece I had to cut it on a 12 by 24 mat, so a longer mat. If you don't have a longer mat, what you can do is cut a 12 by 12 sheet in half and then score it in the center. I've already folded down on the score lines for both panels. On the smaller piece, I'm putting glue on the tab that's at one end. So I'm just tucking that tab under the longer piece. I'm connecting the longer piece right at the score line of the tab, and I want the sides to be nice and even. So that creates my tri-fold card. And then I have 3 pieces of 80-pound cardstock that I'm going to glue down to my card base. I'm just putting glue on the underside of my panels. I'm trying to leave an even border on all 4 sides. Next I'm going to work on the gazebo. So this is my main gazebo piece, and this would be the front of my gazebo, and this is the back. So I'm folding down on the score line between my 2 panels. I'm folding on all the score lines for my gazebo on both sides of my gazebo. I like to use my scraper tool, and I'm positioning it on that score line and then using it to make nice crisp folds. I'm putting glue on one of the panels that has all the cutouts and the cutout of the couple in it. And then I'm folding the other side down. I want them stacked exactly on top of one another, or at least as much as possible. And then the panels that are on the bottom of my couple get folded away from one another, like so. And the same thing for the panels at the top. So once I have my shape that looks like this, on each side, I'm folding down on this score line and then down on the tab as well. And I'm doing that on both sides the same way. I'm about to lose access to the center images here, so I've got the bride and groom out of foil poster board. And I'm just gluing them down onto the image that's in my gazebo base. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. I'm folding both sides of that top part upwards, and then I'm folding both sides of that bottom part upwards as well, like so. Then I'm putting glue on the tab at the top from the score line to the end, and I'm folding it downwards as straight as possible. The score line of that tab should be right against that bottom panel. So I want both sides to be nice and even. My piece should still lay flat. I'm going to flip my piece over and do the same thing on the other side. I'm putting glue from the score line to the end on that tab. Then I'm folding at this score line, bringing my panel down and gluing my tab just at the edge of that bottom panel. This piece should lay as flat as possible. And then I have these 2 pieces. There are 3 score lines on each one of these panels. I'm folding down on those score lines. For the white, I've used Cricut 80-pound cardstock. I'm taking my gazebo piece, and I have my piece that has that same cutout in the center. I'm putting glue on the underside of that piece between the score lines all over that section. And then I'm matching up the edges and the cutout in the center. I'm trying not to get glue anywhere but on that center panel. I'm going to flip my piece over, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So after gluing this piece down, I have this tab on the right hand side. I'm putting glue all over that tab. I'm tucking it under, and I'm gluing it to the other half of the side of my gazebo. And then I'm going to lift this side up. I'm folding this tab over, putting glue all over it, and then gluing that side down as well. So all those sides are connected to form one hexagon. So when I pop it up, it pops up like so. So next I'm working on my roof piece. I have these 2 pieces, they're identical, and I'm just folding on all the score lines for them. Again, I'm using my Cricut scraper to fold down on those score lines. I'm placing the edge right on the score line and then just folding. And then I have this piece. It has score lines all along the length of it. Just folding down on all those score lines as well. So I'm taking one of these pieces, it looks like a barbecue spatula. I'm going to flip it over. I'm folding over the tab at one end. I'm putting glue all along the edge of that tab, right above the score line, folding down on the score line where it starts to narrow. And I want the top edge of my piece to be right along the score line of my tab. And my piece should lay flat. So then when I pop it up, my piece looks like this. So I'm going to do that with the second one, exact same way. I'm lining up the left and right edges and the edge of my piece along the score line, and then just making sure it's nice and flat. So that's two halves that create a hole. I'm taking one of the pieces that I've just assembled and I'm putting glue all around the cutout. And I have a little rectangular piece and I'm covering the cutout with the rectangular piece. So it should fit just above that score line. Should be a small border all the way around. I have these two pieces that look like arrows. I'm putting glue on one of them and then stacking up the other one on top. And then I'm putting glue on that little rectangle at the bottom, gluing it down. I want those little corners to be right at the edge of my piece, like so. And then I'm taking my second piece. So I have my trapezoid shape at the bottom. I'm covering everything else in glue. And then I'm going to flip it over and then I'm matching it up with the first piece. So then I have the piece with all the score lines. I'm putting it right side down on my craft mat and folding over the tab that's at one end, putting glue all over that tab. And then I'm folding the tab over. So I want the sides to be even and the top to be right against the score line. So that'll form a hexagon shape. And then I'm flattening my hexagon so that the join piece is towards the back. And then I'm taking the piece that I've just assembled. I'm putting glue so between the score lines just on that front rectangle. I'm flipping it over. I'm putting glue on the back rectangle. And then I'm inserting my flattened hexagon. I want the top of it to be right on the score line of where I've just put glue. The score lines should be just along the edges of that piece. So it's centered on my piece. It should be a tight fit. I'm pushing my piece downwards so that it pops through the bottom. And then I'm pushing my piece upwards so that it pops through the top. I'm doing that a couple times just to work my piece. So next I'm taking my gazebo piece, and at the top of my gazebo piece you'll see that I've scored a hexagon shape that matches the hexagon shape that's at the bottom of the pop-up that I've just formed. I'm pushing the top through the bottom so that I have these trapezoid shapes exposed, and I'm just putting glue on both of them. So these are at the bottom. I'm positioning one half of the hexagon over the score line, and then I'm collapsing my piece, and I'm just applying pressure where my piece is. Now that the glue has dried a little bit, when I pop it up, it should look like this. And so next I'm going to work on the rooftop. So this is shimmer cardstock. And I have the main piece, which I've left blank. And then I have the tiles. I've drawn the little shingles on my rooftop with the pen feature in Design Space. So I'm just folding down on all the score lines for my roof piece. And then I have a tab piece. I'm putting glue on the score line to the edge. And then I am closing my shape by gluing the cut edge of one end to the score line of the tab where I just put glue. So I folded down my piece so that there's a tab in the middle section at the bottom on both sides. I've got my gazebo piece with the top towards the right, and I have my roof piece with those tabs towards the left. So I'm sandwiching that center part in between my roof piece. I'm gluing the tabs from my roof just between the score lines on that front section at the front and between the score lines on that center back section. So my roof piece is just glued down. That's 2 points. So when I pop up my piece, that center part goes through like so. And then I have the shingle pieces to put on my rooftop. I'm putting glue directly on my rooftop and then just gluing these pieces down. There should be a small border on all 3 sides. So next I have these 2 trapezoid shapes. I've cut them out of craft board and I'm just gluing them to the bottom of my gazebo. So I have my gazebo flattened out. I want the top of my trapezoid shape to be as close as possible to the score line at the bottom of my gazebo. And I'm doing that for the other side of the bottom as well. I'm taking my gazebo piece, I'm rotating my base so that the bottom is on the left hand side, and I've put 2 pieces of foam tape just on the very edge of that bottom platform. Now this is very thin foam tape. I'm removing the liner on my foam tape, and I'm placing the fold of my gazebo on the score line of my card. I want the same amount on the top and the bottom. I'm holding everything in place and then laying it flat. And then I'm applying pressure where that foam tape is. So then when I open my card, my gazebo opens like so. And then I'm going to decorate the panel in front of my gazebo. So first I'm going to lay down my Kate and Andy. And I've cut this out of Cricut Value Vinyl. I'm using a well-loved piece of transfer tape, and I'm applying it to the base of my card. And I'm centering my letters as much as possible. I want them as straight as possible as well. And I'm applying my vinyl to my cardstock base. So for this part, I used an extremely convoluted process to glue these down. So in the file, I'm going to include score lines where all the ring pieces belong. So just glue the ring pieces down. The names are cut out of Value Vinyl. The shiny gold part is cut out of foil cardstock, and the inside of the diamond is cut out of holographic cardstock. And I'm just gluing everything down. And then I have the congratulations for the back of my card. So this is more that blue Value Vinyl, and then 2 layers of 80-pound cardstock. And I'm just gluing that down. And then this is going to be a card that's going to be passed around the office and signed by many people. So I'm creating a little booklet where everybody can sign. This is my envelope for the booklet. So I folded down on all the score lines for it. I have some embroidery floss, and I've cut about 16 inches. I'm threading a needle. I'm bringing my needle down in that center hole. So I have all those holes lined up on top of one another. And then I'm bringing my needle up again in the hole that's on my left-hand side. Then pushing it down in the center hole. And then bringing my needle up in the hole that's on the right-hand side. And then tucking my needle underneath the thread that's on my left-hand side, pulling everything taut. And I'm going to make a knot, tie a bow. So that's my little booklet. And then I have my little envelope. So my booklet goes in my envelope like so. I'm going to put glue on the tip of one of the points on the wrong side and on the right side on the other one. Fold them into one another like so. So not too tightly. I'm letting it bounce a little. Give extra room for my booklet. And then I'm putting glue all along the bottom panel and folding it upwards. And then I have the vinyl that goes on the envelope. I'm using some transfer tape that I've stuck to my jeans a few times to remove most of the stickiness. And then I'm applying that to the back of my envelope. And then I have these 3/8 of an inch Velcro fasteners. I'm going to need 4 sets of these. The matching pieces of Velcro stuck to one another. And I'm removing the liner from the adhesive part of one of them. I'm gluing that down to the point of my envelope and removing the adhesive liner on the second side of my Velcro dot. And then I'm closing my envelope as it would naturally fall. And then I'm going in there with my Cricut tool, and I am separating both sides of my Velcro and then applying a little extra pressure to make sure that they both stay put. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the 3 other dots, one centered on the flap of my envelope, and the 2 others are going to be on the bottom of my envelope. I want them positioned pretty much the same level. And then I'm removing the liner on the adhesive side. I'm placing my envelope on the top panel. I'm trying to center it as best I can. The whole reason for my color scheme are these little flowers. I've cut them out of printable vinyl because I like how vivid the colors are with printable vinyl. And then I'm applying them to my card. So the smallest ones I'm gluing on paper backing. So this is 80-pound cardstock, and I am matching up the edges and gluing them down. And then I'm gluing some at the front of my gazebo like so. I've adhered 2 of them down here on the envelope, and then 5 on the card base surrounding my gazebo. So next I'm going to work on the cover of my card. I have 3 sets of panels for the bottom of my card. And the bottom layer is 80-pound cardstock, and I'm covering it with some pattern cardstock. 2 of them are going to be glued on to the outside of my card, and the third one is going to be the cover of my card. I have the base for my champagne flutes, and then I have the 2 layers for the glasses themselves. The bottom layer is craft board. The layer that goes on top is foil cardstock. So I'm just putting glue on the underside of the foil cardstock layer, and then gluing them together stacked up on top of one another like so. I'm doing that with both sets. And then I'm covering the underside of them in glue, and I'm positioning them within the score lines that are on my base piece. So the score lines show me exactly where to glue these down. My bride glass is on the right. This is gold foil cardstock. I'm just placing it inside my glass. And then I have some white glitter cardstock, and then I'm gluing that on top of the gold layer. And then the groom is on the left-hand side. So in the file, I've put 3 tiny little circles for the buttons. But for this card, I'm going to use some adhesive back gems for the buttons instead. I already had the bow ties assembled. I'm just gluing down the bow tie and the bow. And then I have a little flower for the bride's dress, and I'm just using this stylus. It's actually a cake decorating tool, but I use it as a stylus to form flowers. I've got it on a foam pad, and I'm starting in the middle of my flower and just moving to the outside of the petals. And this is just to give it a little bit of dimension. In the file, there is a little dot to go in the center. So I've decided to use an adhesive backed rhinestone. So I'm using a little bit of foam tape and not applying that to the top of my bride's dress. I'm gluing down the decorative cardstock for the cover of my card. I'm putting glue on the underside of my glasses and just gluing them down to the front of my card. And then I have my sentiment for the front. I've put some foam tape on the ends and in the center. I'm going to remove the liner on my foam tape. And then I'm just gluing my sentiment down like so. And then I'm going to take my card base and I'm going to close my card. So this is the cover of my card. I'm just marking the middle and the back. I'm centering some red line tape over the little marking that I have on my card, and I'm flipping my card over and doing that on the back as well. I'm taking the liner off my red line tape, and so I have my 2 pieces of ribbon. I've used iron-on just ribbon from the dollar store, but I've personalized it. And I'm just placing my ribbon, I'm centering it over the red line tape that I've put down, and then I'm adding red line tape just on top of my ribbon. I'm flipping my card over, and I'm doing the exact same thing on the back of my card. On the cover of my card, I'm going to glue down the cover panel. I'm removing the liner on my red line tape, and I'm putting glue on the underside of my decorated cover, and I'm trying to position it so that it's centered on my front panel. So I want an even border on all 4 sides. I'm gluing down the back panel the same way. And then I have that 3rd panel, and I'm gluing down the panels for it. And then I'm going to trim off the ends of my ribbon.